We met in the park 2 years ago. I used to go there often just to clear my head and enjoy the outdoors. One day, I saw her sitting on a bench looking lost in thought. I don't know what got into me, but I walked up to her and asked if I could sit down. There was a bit of an awkward silence, but then we started talking. She had to leave soon after, but we exchanged numbers. A few days later, I called her and asked if she'd like to go out over the weekend. She agreed, and we went to a cafe. I was 18 at the time, and she was 19. That first date was amazing. We talked for hours and realized we had so much in common. By the end of it, I asked her if she'd like to see me again, and she said yes. I was over the moon. We started dating, and it felt like I had found my other half. We were so happy together, and everything seemed perfect. Fast forward 2 years, and things started to change. We're married now, but there's been a lot less closeness between us. She often says she doesn't have time, and I'm busy with work. It feels like we're drifting apart, and I don't know how to stop it. A few months ago, during one of my regular checkups, the doctor found something concerning. After a full preventive examination, I was diagnosed with stage 1 blood cancer. When the doctor told me, I was in shock. Stage 1 isn't the worst, but it's still cancer. It was hard to accept. The doctor said I needed to come back the next day for more tests and to start radiotherapy. After I was discharged from the hospital, I went straight home to tell my wife. That evening, I sat her down and told her about my diagnosis and that I had to start therapy the next day. She took it hard. She cried a bit, and I tried to comfort her, even though I was struggling to accept it myself. After the initial round of examinations and radiation therapy, the doctor said they had removed the tumor, but I would need more preventive measures to prevent a relapse. 2 weeks passed after the diagnosis, and I was starting to feel a bit better physically. But emotionally, I was still a wreck. Then, out of nowhere, my sister called me. She told me she had seen my wife sitting in a cafe with a stranger. She was driving past and saw them through the window. She said they looked too cozy to be just friends. My heart sank. I didn't know what to think or do. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't ignore it either. I didn't tell my wife what my sister had seen. Instead, I decided to gather more evidence. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe he was a work colleague or an old friend. But deep down, I had a feeling something was off. The next day, I decided to follow her. I felt terrible doing it, but I needed to know the truth. She said she was going out to meet a friend, so I waited until she left and then followed her. She went to the same cafe my sister mentioned. Sure enough, there he was, the same guy. They were laughing, talking, and sitting close. I stayed outside watching them through the window, feeling like my whole world was falling apart. After a while, they got up and left together. I followed them, keeping my distance. They walked a few blocks and went into a residential building. I stood there for a while, trying to process what I had just seen. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the person I thought would be my rock through this battle with cancer, was cheating on me. I went back home, not sure what to do next. I felt betrayed, angry, and devastated. How could she do this to me? Especially now, when I needed her the most. I didn't confront her immediately. I needed time to think. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scenes in my head. Her laughing with him, walking with him, going into that building. I decided I needed to confront her, but I didn't know how to do it. Should I just come out and ask her? Should I wait and gather more evidence? My mind was a mess. Over the next few days, I tried to make sense of it all. I thought about our relationship, the happy times, and how everything had fallen apart. I wanted to believe that it was just a mistake, that she was confused and scared because of my diagnosis. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it was a choice she made. She chose to betray me when I needed her the most. One night, my sister and I were sitting on the porch, and she asked me what I was going to do. I told her I didn't know. Part of me wanted to try and work things out, but another part of me was too hurt to even consider it. She told me that whatever I decided, she would support me, but I needed to think about what was best for me, not just for her. I left again, not sure what to do. I spent the next few days thinking about everything. I thought about our relationship, the good times and the bad. I thought about how she had betrayed me, but also about how I still loved her. I was torn between wanting to give her another chance and wanting to walk away for good. So that's my story. If anyone has been through something similar or has any advice, I'd love to hear it. Is it even possible? Thanks for listening. Hey everyone, I'm back with part 2 of my story. Things have been pretty rough lately, and I could really use your advice and support to get through this. Since my initial cancer diagnosis and treatment, I've been really diligent about getting regular checkups. Every 6 months, I go in for a full examination to make sure the cancer hasn't returned. So far, the doctors have said everything looks fine, which is a huge relief. Physically, I'm doing okay, but emotionally, I'm still struggling to come to terms with everything that's happened. I decided I needed to meet with my sister again to talk about what to do next. We met at our favorite coffee shop and had a long discussion about the situation. She suggested that she continue following my wife to gather more evidence. She said that as soon as we had enough, we could contact a lawyer. It felt sneaky and underhanded, but I didn't see any other way to handle it. We finished our coffee, hugged, and went our separate ways, both of us feeling the weight of what was happening. Up until this point, I hadn't told anyone about my cancer diagnosis besides my wife and sister. I knew I needed to tell my parents, even though we didn't have the best relationship. We often quarreled and disagreed, but they were my closest family, and I owed it to them to be honest. I drove over to their place, feeling a knot of anxiety in my stomach. When I arrived, I told them we needed to have a serious talk. They looked worried, and I could see the concern in their eyes. I told them about my stage 1 cancer diagnosis and that I had been getting regular checkups to make sure everything was fine. They were a bit angry that I hadn't told them earlier, but they understood and supported me. They reassured me that if I needed any financial or psychological support, they would be there for me. It was a relief to get it off my chest, and I felt a bit closer to them afterward. After that conversation, I met up with some friends. They were shocked but supportive, and it felt good to have their backing too. A few days later, my sister called me with an update. She had followed my wife and gotten more evidence. She even had a photo of them kissing. My heart sank. It didn't make it any easier to see it, but it confirmed what I already knew. My wife was cheating on me, and she had been doing it while I was dealing with cancer. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. When my sister came over, we started looking for a divorce attorney. We needed someone who could handle this delicately and professionally. After some searching, we finally found one who seemed like a good fit. We met with him, showed him the evidence, and discussed the next steps. He was understanding and assured us that he would take care of everything. We felt a bit more hopeful after the meeting, but the road ahead still looked long and painful. I realized that I needed to confront my wife and tell her everything. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, knowing she was betraying me and not doing anything about it. That evening, I gathered all my things and waited for her to come home. When she walked in, I told her we needed to have a serious talk. She looked confused and worried, but she sat down and listened. I threw the evidence on the table, the photos, the messages, everything. She stared at them, and her face went pale. I told her that I knew she'd been cheating on me, even while I was dealing with cancer. She tried to deny it at first, but I told her there was no point in lying anymore. I told her that I was leaving and that our marriage was over. I packed my things and walked out the door, feeling a mix of relief and heartbreak. I'm staying with my sister for now, trying to figure out what to do next. It's been really tough, but I know I made the right decision. I couldn't keep living a lie, and I deserve better than someone who would betray me like that. Thank you all for your advice and support. Your words of encouragement have meant a lot to me during this difficult time. I'm trying to take things one day at a time and focus on rebuilding my life. If anyone has been through something similar or has any advice, I'd love to hear it. How do you rebuild your life after something like this? Thanks for listening. So I wanted to give you all an update on what's been happening. After meeting with the lawyer, I decided to take some time for myself. I needed to clear my head and figure out what I wanted to do next. My sister continued to gather evidence, and we stayed in close contact. I knew I couldn't put off confronting my wife forever, but I wasn't ready just yet. I spent a lot of time reflecting on our relationship, trying to understand how we got to this point. It was painful to think about all the happy moments we shared, knowing that she had betrayed me during one of the most challenging times of my life. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, and I couldn't wake up. During this time, I focused on my health and well-being. I continued to go for regular checkups, and thankfully, everything was still looking good. Physically, I was doing better, but emotionally, I was still a wreck. I leaned on my friends and family for support, and they were amazing. They helped me stay strong and reminded me that I deserved better. My sister kept me updated on her progress, and each new piece of evidence felt like a dagger to the heart. It was hard to accept that the person I loved and trusted could do something so hurtful. But with each new piece of information, I felt more determined to move forward and start the divorce process. The divorce process was tough, but having my sister and the lawyer by my side made it a bit easier. We worked through the legal aspects and started to separate our lives. It was a slow and painful process, but with each step, I felt a bit more free. I want to thank all of you for your support and advice. Your words of encouragement have meant a lot to me during this difficult time. I'm trying to take things one day at a time and focus on rebuilding my life. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm hopeful that better days are ahead. So that's where I'm at now. I'm still healing, still processing everything, but I'm moving forward. If anyone has been through something similar or has any advice, I'd love to hear it. How do you rebuild your life after something like this? Thanks for listening. Hey everyone, I'm back again with part 3 of my story. First off, I want to thank all of you for your support and advice. Reading your comments and messages has really helped me feel less alone during this tough time. It means a lot to know that there are people out there who care. By the way, I forgot to mention earlier that my wife and I had been renting a house. When everything went down, I had to pack up my things and move them to my sister's place. We only had one car, so I used that to transport my stuff. It was a pretty surreal experience, loading up all my belongings and driving away from what used to be our home. The car was filled with boxes of clothes, books, and personal items. It felt like I was packing up my entire life and leaving it behind. As I drove to my sister's, I couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for what I was leaving behind, and relief for getting away from the toxic situation. After I moved in with my sister, I knew I had to tell my parents about the divorce. They already knew about the cancer, but this was another bombshell I had to drop. I decided to text them first, thinking it might be easier to explain everything that way. Almost immediately after I sent the text, my mom called me. The first thing she asked was, "Are you sure?" I told her yes, and we talked about everything. Despite our rocky relationship, she was really supportive. She offered to help in any way she could and reassured me that I was making the right decision. It felt good to hear her voice and know that she was there for me. It made me feel a bit better, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My dad also chimed in with his support, which surprised me given our history of disagreements. It felt like, for the first time in a long while, my family was coming together to support me. Not long after that, something unexpected happened. I was sitting at my sister's house, trying to relax and clear my mind, when there was a loud banging on the door. At first, I thought it was just a delivery or something, but then I heard shouting. It was my wife's affair partner. He was yelling that he loved her and that I wouldn't stand in their way. I have no idea how he got my sister's address, but he was banging on the door so hard I thought it might break. I didn't know what to do at first. My heart was racing, and I felt a surge of anger and fear. I shouted back that I was going to call the police if he didn't leave immediately. To my surprise, he stopped knocking and left. It ended much quicker than I expected, but it still left me feeling shaken and vulnerable. How could things have escalated to this point? It was like something out of a bad movie. I never thought I'd be in a situation where someone would come banging on my door making threats. My sister was equally shocked and upset. She suggested we notify the police just in case he tried something again. We filed a report, and they promised to keep an eye on the area. It was a small comfort, but it was better than nothing. After that incident, my sister and I decided we needed a break from all the drama. We went on a picnic and played some basketball just like we used to when we were kids. It was a great time. We laughed, talked, and for a little while I was able to forget about everything that was happening. It was a much-needed escape from reality. The evidence was already collected, and all that was left was to wait for the legal process to unfold. During our picnic, we talked about our childhood, reminisced about happier times, and made plans for the future. It felt good to focus on something positive for a change. We even joked about how bad we were at basketball compared to when we were kids. Those few hours spent outside, enjoying the fresh air and each other's company, were a reminder that life can still have good moments, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. To everyone who has been following my story and offering advice, thank you. Your support has been a lifeline. Knowing that there are people out there who care and understand what I'm going through has made a world of difference. I'm trying to take things one day at a time and focus on rebuilding my life. In the days following the picnic, I started to focus more on myself. I decided to pick up some old hobbies that I had neglected over the years. I started drawing again, something I used to love but had put aside due to life's demands. It was therapeutic to lose myself in art, to create something beautiful out of the chaos. I also began to exercise regularly, using it as a way to clear my mind and keep my body healthy. The physical activity helped reduce my stress and gave me a sense of accomplishment. My sister continued to be a tremendous support. She encouraged me to go out and socialize, reminding me that isolating myself wouldn't help. I reconnected with some old friends, explaining to them what had happened. Their support was overwhelming. They invited me out for dinners, movies, and just hanging out. It felt good to be around people who cared about me and wanted to see me happy. The legal process for the divorce was moving along. The lawyer we had hired was efficient and understanding. He kept us updated on every step and reassured us that everything was going according to plan. My sister and I reviewed the documents together, making sure everything was in order. It was a tedious process, but knowing that it would eventually lead to a fresh start kept me motivated. Despite the progress, there were still tough days. Days when the reality of the situation would hit me hard, and I'd feel overwhelmed with sadness and anger. On those days, I reminded myself of how far I had come and how much support I had around me. I reached out to friends and family, talked about my feelings, and allowed myself to grieve. It was important to acknowledge the pain, but also to keep moving forward. One of the hardest parts was dealing with the memories. Everywhere I looked, there were reminders of the life I had shared with my wife. The places we used to go, the songs we used to listen to, even the food we used to eat. It was painful, but I began to create new memories, new routines, and new traditions. I started exploring new places, trying new activities, and finding joy in things I had never considered before. Throughout this journey, the support from all of you has been invaluable. Your advice, your kind words, and your encouragement have kept me going. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm focusing on healing, on rebuilding my life, and on finding happiness again. So that's where I'm at now. The legal process is moving forward, and I'm trying to stay positive. It's not easy, but I'm taking it one step at a time. If anyone has been through something similar or has any advice, I'd love to hear it. How do you keep moving forward when life feels so uncertain? Thanks for listening. Hey everyone, I'm back with part 4 of my story. Your support has been incredible, and it's really helping me get through this tough time. Here's what's been going on lately. I had stopped going to work when I was diagnosed with cancer. Between the treatments and dealing with everything else, I just couldn't handle it. But as I started to feel better physically, I decided it was time to go back. Returning to work was a big step for me. It gave me a sense of normalcy and something to focus on besides the mess my personal life had become. My colleagues were supportive, and it felt good to be productive again. One of the highlights recently was a fishing trip I took with my sister. We decided to go fishing over the weekend before the work on my divorce case picked up. It was a great escape from everything. I hadn't gone fishing in years, and I'd forgotten how relaxing it could be. We drove out to a quiet spot by the lake early in the morning, set up our gear, and just enjoyed the peace and quiet. I managed to catch a lot of fish that day, which was surprising because I'm usually not that lucky. My sister had never really fished before, so I taught her the basics. It was wonderful to share that experience with her, and it brought us even closer. For a few hours, I was able to forget about all the stress and just enjoy the moment. Back to the legal stuff. I recently received an update from my lawyer. He wrote to me and said that the documents are ready for court. It was a relief to hear that everything was moving forward. We decided to inform my wife through her friend that the court date would be in 14 days. I didn't want to speak to her directly, and this seemed like the best way to handle it. It felt strange to be communicating through intermediaries, but it was necessary to keep things civil and straightforward. I also updated my parents about the upcoming court case. They've been really supportive through all of this, which has been a big help. I wrote to them and explained that the court date was set and that we'd be moving forward with the proceedings soon. We talked a little, and their confidence in me was reassuring. They believed we had a strong case and were optimistic about the outcome. Knowing they were in my corner gave me a boost of confidence, too. Now all I can think about is the trial. It's constantly on my mind. I keep going over everything in my head, trying to prepare myself for what's to come. I know it's going to be tough, but I'm determined to see it through. This is the final step in putting this whole mess behind me and starting fresh. I'm planning to write about the trial next, so wish me luck. It's going to be a challenging time, but I'm ready to face it. Thank you all again for your support and advice. It means the world to me. If anyone has any tips on how to stay calm and focused during a court case, I'd love to hear them. This community has been a lifeline for me, and I'm grateful for each and every one of you. That's where things stand right now. The trial is approaching, and I'm doing my best to stay positive and prepared. If anyone has been through something similar or has any advice, I'd really appreciate it. How do you keep your nerves in check and stay focused during such a stressful time? Thanks for listening. Hey everyone, I'm back with part 5 of my story. Yesterday was the trial, and I'm here to tell you all about it. It's been a whirlwind of emotions, and I'm still processing everything, but I wanted to share what happened. We had been preparing for the court date for weeks. My lawyer was thorough and confident, and my sister was by my side every step of the way. My parents, unfortunately, couldn't make it, but they were there in spirit, cheering me on. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over everything in my head, making sure I was ready for whatever might come. On the morning of the trial, my lawyer, my sister, and I arrived at the courthouse early. We met outside the courtroom, and my lawyer went over the plan one last time. He reassured me that we had a solid case and that there was nothing to worry about. My sister hugged me and told me she was proud of how strong I had been through all of this. Her words meant a lot, and they gave me the extra boost of confidence I needed. As we walked into the courthouse, I felt a mixture of nerves and determination. I knew this was the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to finally put everything behind me and move on with my life. We sat in the waiting area, and I tried to stay calm, focusing on my breathing and reminding myself that I was ready for this. Before the trial began, we saw my wife and her lawyer arrive. She looked tense and avoided making eye contact with me. It was strange seeing her after everything that had happened. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, but I pushed those feelings aside. I needed to stay focused. The trial started, and my lawyer began by presenting our case. He spoke confidently and clearly, laying out all the evidence we had gathered. He explained how the affair had started while I was battling cancer and how it had affected me emotionally and physically. He showed the photos, the messages, and everything else we had collected. As he spoke, I could see the judge listening intently, nodding occasionally. My sister sat next to me, holding my hand and giving me silent support. When it was my wife's lawyer's turn to speak, things took a different turn. They tried to paint a picture of confusion and misunderstanding, but it was clear that their arguments were weak and filled with inconsistencies. They stumbled over their words, and the facts didn't add up. It was a mess. I could see the judge's expression change as they spoke, and it was clear that he wasn't buying their story. My lawyer wrapped up our case with a strong closing statement, summarizing everything we had presented and emphasizing the impact of my wife's actions on my life. It was powerful, and I could see the judge nodding in agreement. Then the moment came. The judge announced his decision. We had won. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was finally over. After the trial, I approached my wife and asked her to sign the divorce agreement. She looked defeated and didn't argue. I told her that this would be the last time she would see me, and that I wanted to move on with my life. She signed the papers without any fuss. It was surprisingly easy, and I felt a sense of closure as I watched her sign her name. After that, my lawyer congratulated me, and my sister hugged me tightly. We stepped outside the courthouse, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. My wife had decided to go to Florida, and I knew that was the last I would hear from her. It was a strange feeling, knowing that she was out of my life for good, but it was also a relief. I could finally start to rebuild and focus on myself. I have to say, I don't have any regrets about how things turned out. My wife made her choices, and I had to make mine. It was tough, but I came out stronger in the end. I've learned a lot about myself through this process, and I'm ready to move forward. Thanks again to all of you for your support and advice. Your words have meant so much to me during this difficult time. I'm taking things one day at a time and looking forward to what the future holds. If anyone has any tips on how to start over and rebuild after something like this, I'd love to hear them. Thanks for listening. That's where things stand right now. The trial is behind me, and I'm focused on moving forward. If anyone has been through something similar, or has any advice on how to start fresh, I'd really appreciate it. How do you rebuild your life after something like this? Thanks for being there for me. Hey everyone, it's been 9 months since my last update. I know many of you are probably wondering how things have turned out, especially regarding my ex-wife and how my life has changed. Let me fill you in on what's been happening. After the court case, my wife left for Florida, and I never heard from her again. It was strange at first, knowing that someone who had been such a significant part of my life was now just gone. There were no texts, no calls, nothing. It was like she vanished. I suppose it's for the best. She made her choices, and I made mine. Life has a way of moving on, even when it feels like everything has fallen apart. In the months following the trial, I threw myself into work. I went back to my job in construction. It was tough, both physically and emotionally, but it kept my mind occupied. The work was demanding, and the pay wasn't great, but it was honest work, and it helped me stay afloat. Eventually, I moved out of my sister's place and into a rented apartment. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was mine, and it felt good to have my own space again. Money was tight. I thought about starting a business to improve my financial situation, but I just didn't have the funds to get it off the ground. It was frustrating, feeling like I was stuck in a rut, but I kept pushing forward. I knew I couldn't let the past define me. I had to keep looking toward the future, even if it seemed uncertain. Throughout all of this, my sister has been my rock. She's always been there for me, supporting me through the darkest times. I don't know what I would have done without her. She helped me move into my new place, listened to me when I needed to vent, and encouraged me to keep going when I felt like giving up. She's been my biggest cheerleader, and I'm incredibly grateful for her. Recently, I went for another medical examination. I'm happy to report that everything is fine, and the cancer hasn't come back. It was a huge relief to hear those words. After everything I've been through, getting a clean bill of health felt like a new beginning. It gave me hope and reminded me that life goes on, even after the toughest battles. I also want to thank all of you for your support and advice over these past months. Your words of encouragement and kindness have meant the world to me. It's amazing how people I've never met in person have helped me through such a difficult time. Your support has been a lifeline, and I'm truly grateful for each and every one of you. Reflecting on everything that's happened, I've realized something important about how I choose the people in my life. I used to have a principle. I would lend acquaintances money that I was prepared to lose. If they didn't repay me, I'd know they weren't worth keeping around. It was a way to filter out those who didn't deserve my trust. Looking back, I don't know how I let my ex-wife into my life. Maybe in my youth, I wasn't thinking with my head but with something else. It's a hard lesson learned, but I'm wiser for it now. Life has a funny way of teaching us lessons, often through the most painful experiences. When I first found out about my wife's betrayal, I felt like my world was falling apart. But now, 9 months later, I can see how those experiences have shaped me into a stronger, more resilient person. I've learned to value myself and to be more cautious about who I let into my life. The past 9 months haven't been easy. There were days when I didn't want to get out of bed, when the weight of everything seemed too much to bear. But I kept going one day at a time. I found solace in the little things: a good cup of coffee, a beautiful sunset, a kind word from a friend. Those small moments of joy reminded me that life, despite its hardships, can still be beautiful. I've also reconnected with old friends and made some new ones. It's been great to surround myself with positive, supportive people. We've had some fun times together, and it's helped me feel less alone. I've started to build a new community, one that's built on trust, respect, and mutual support. It's been a healing process, and I'm grateful for every person who's been a part of it. As for my ex-wife, I've let go of the anger and resentment. Holding on to those feelings was only hurting me. She's made her choices, and I've made mine. She's in Florida, living her life, and I'm here, building mine. I wish her no ill will. I just hope she finds whatever it is she's looking for. I've also been exploring new hobbies and interests. I started taking a cooking class, which has been a lot of fun. I've always liked cooking, but now I'm learning to make some really amazing dishes, It's been a great way to meet new people and learn new skills. Plus, it's given me something to look forward to each week. I've been hiking more too. There's something incredibly healing about being out in nature, away from the noise and stress of everyday life. It's a chance to clear my head, to reflect, and to appreciate the beauty of the world around me. Each hike feels like a small victory, a reminder that I'm moving forward, one step at a time. In the evenings, I often sit on my balcony, looking out at the city lights and thinking about how far I've come. It's been a long, hard journey, but I'm proud of myself for getting through it. I've learned to appreciate the simple pleasures in life, to be grateful for what I have, and to keep pushing forward, no matter what. So here I am, 9 months after the trial, in a much better place. I'm healthier, stronger, and more determined than ever to build a happy, fulfilling life. It hasn't been easy, but I've made it through with the support of my family, friends, and all of you.